Yeah, I drank some. Thank you.
John did it.
Very nice. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that McNally Robinson is located here in Treaty 1 territory. That's the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson itself is based on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are gathered here today with many thanks to Palimpsest Press for both publishing this book and making this evening possible to celebrate the Winnipeg launch of Fire Monster by Anita Lahey and Pauline Conley, a fact we may applaud. I'll just do a few very quick procedural notes and then I'll get out of your way and let the folks who have come here to see actually speak about this wonderful multi-genre book. So the first is that there will be a series of readings and then a conversation up here, followed by which, though that's not proper English, which will be followed by an opportunity for you folks to ask questions. So if you are based here, please just put up your hand and I'll rush over to you with a microphone. Again, not a comment on your ability to project, just to ensure that those watching at home can hear your question. If you are one of those people watching on YouTube, please feel free to write any questions you might have in the chat. We will put them to tonight's participants as time permits. The only other thing I will point out is that at the end of the event, we'll be relocating tonight's guests over to a table beside the cash desk to sign books, and I'll have more exciting signing procedural notes for you at the close of the event. So stand by for those. I'm feeling in a particularly beneficent mood tonight, so I will not sarcastically introduce your host for this evening, as I so often do. I'm actually legitimately pleased that she is hosting here this evening and entering for a really strong conversation. Ariel Gordon is a Winnipeg / Treaty 1 territory-based writer, editor, and enthusiast. Her fifth book, Sightseeing, Writing Nature and Climate Across the Prairies, written in collaboration with Saskatchewan poet Brenda Schmidt, will be published by Advay Press in fall of this year. Gordon's work has appeared recently in Canadian Notes and Queries, Canthias, Periodicities, and the Quarantine Review, and is forthcoming in Free Falling Grain, or is currently published in Free Falling Grain as second place winner of the Kloppenberg Hybrid Grain Contest. So with all that out of the way, please join me in welcoming Ariel Gordon.
I know it hurts John to say nice things about me, so I'm glad to have forced him to do it. I'm also super glad to be here in the stead of Palimpsest Press publisher, Amy Parent-Dunn. I'm pleased to be here as a pressmate of these two, having published my first two books with Palimpsest, but I'm particularly pleased to be here, and I'm also popping my peas as someone who loves both poetry and graphic novels, as someone who collaborates as often as possible with other artists. And if you're from Winnipeg, you might remember Alchemical Press, which was a collaboration between poet John Toon and graphic novelist and writer GMB Komichuk. And they did a cowboy story in each of like the three anthologies, and each of them had this cowboy story with Greg's graphics and John's poetry, and he would write them directly on the panels. And this, like, he had elaborated this beautiful like handwriting, and I was just so fascinated by that as a new poet and as someone that had grown up reading graphic novels. Who here remembers ElfQuest? I started with ElfQuest, and I moved on to Sandman, the great series by Neil Gaiman. Thank you, and it's gone on from there. And my daughter is now 17, but the world of graphic novels has just expanded and exploded, and there's so much wonderful narrative storytelling that's happening that way. And you know, we've got Shelter Belts, Jonathan Dick's graphic novel in stories that is nominated this year for the fiction category for the Manitoba Book Awards. What? And Book of the Year, March says. Oh, non-fiction? Oh, well, never mind. Don't listen to me at all. But anyways, it's nominated in outside of the graphic novel and commercial, commercial fiction categories. So I think this is like a really timely collaboration, but I also think that it's completely unique and has such a long and interesting history in its development. So I'm really pleased to be here to talk to you about it, and let's hear them talk about it more than anything else. So I'm going to read the description of the book, which is called Fire Monster. Ooh, look, more people, come in. I don't like to shame people as they come in. I'm welcoming you gently to the event. Well, you have to own that yourself. All right, so can we just have a round of applause for this glorious cover, this intriguing cover that Pauline is responsible for. All right, so I'm going to put on my best teleprompter commercial radio of the 20s voice. Would you return to the landscape you watched burn as a child? Especially if you and everyone else believed that the manic, wind-fueled, merciless fire was your fault. Set in a fictional version of the real Main-à-Dieu, Nova Scotia, where the 1976 wildfire caused catastrophic devastation. Fire Monster tells the tale of a skilled oil sands worker who returns to Cape Breton fishing village where, as a child, he was blamed for causing the fire that tore through the local community, consuming bush, trees, houses, boats, cars, animals, and the century-old Gothic church. At once a poetry collection, a story inspired by true events, and a visually stunning comic book adventure, Fire Monster is a mixed genre story for the ages that explores the aftermath of tragedy, the frayed bonds of friendship and family, and love's redemptive power. And we have the two authors here with us tonight. Anita Lahey's latest book, The Last Goldfish, A True Tale of Friendship, was a finalist for the Ottawa Book Award. Series editor for the Best Canadian Poetry Anthology, she's the author of 2 poetry collections, Spinning Sidekick and Out to Dry in Cape Breton, as well as The Mystery Shopping Cart, essays on poetry and culture. Anita lives with her family in Ottawa, on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. And Pauline Conley recently forayed from an established career as a painter and explainer to do comics. And Fire Monster is her first graphic novel. She's also lived here for 3 years in Winnipeg. So she's you live in Winnipeg for 3 weeks. You are considered a Winnipegger till the end of time. We will claim you. If you have any national success, you can live here 3 weeks and people will be like, she's ours. There's no come from away in Winnipeg. You're instantly ours. You never get to leave, except you're leaving. So we're enjoying her now, and we will continue to claim her. All right, so please welcome for the wonderful reading. I'm sure it will be wonderful. Anita Lahey and Pauline Conley.
Thanks very much, Ariel. That lovely and entertaining introduction. Pauline and I are going to share a couple of scenes together from the book, because as a comic book, it's got dialogue. So should I introduce the first one?
Yes.
Okay, so our first scene is with the 2 kids in the book who are cousins. The fire happened long before they were born, and but they're, growing up with it in the air because people talk about it, they hear stories. It's kind of fascinating and also kind of annoying. And in this scene, Harriet, who's about 12, I think I'm remembering her age, right, has run off into the woods, and Lucas comes upon her. And I'm Harriet.
And I'm Lucas, just in case I didn't automatically seem like a 10-year-old boy.
Okay. And the first lines I'm going to read, not that it really matters, are actually in Harriet's mind. fall and crawl, stop, drop, and roll, fall and crawl, stop, drop, and roll.
Hey, what gives? Why are you here? I know what Lucy said was weird, but you won't ask your mom, which makes no sense. And then you take off from Clarence.
Shut up. Listen, I kind of started a fire. I have to make sure I put it out.
What? You're kind of freaking me out.
I cleared a spot there on that ground. Flossie turned up. She wasn't well. I saw her and I just ran for help. Oh God, see? Those burnt patches all around?
Maybe that black was already there. You just didn't see it.
It wasn't. I can feel it. What if it were an invitation, like a call?
Like you tossed it a ball and it wants to play. And then you took off, you ran away.
That fire's been sleeping so long, there'd be no keeping
it down.
It'd want to be found.
This is crazy. It's not a person, like, it's not alive.
Lucas, once and for all, it's revived.
Don't be so chowder-headed.
I think I know where it's headed. Oh Lord, we have to warn them. This is the page, by the way. So.
So I'm going to read you a poem from the book, one of Anita's poems that formed the whole story. And in this particular poem, the speaker is Father Frank, who is a recently installed Catholic priest who's having a hard time adjusting to life in Cape Breton. And so he's come to the church to pray about it. Grant me the grace to consume rubbery lobes of bottom feeder, greased in butter, without any lasting questioning of my faith. Teach me to speak, boat, truck, and bottle depot, duck blinds and tides, whale box, wind speed, Walmart, wharf trap, plant license, fortress, season, dole. Lord, the hymns here are strained, generations driven off by want or greed, lack of wherewithal, who can say? I hear tell of this terror of a fire, what took the church and so much else. Too bad you never saw her, she was beautiful. The church or the fire, I daren't ask. Cape Breton mist is cold, thick, this island's history untamed. Is there a core here? Not in any streetscape or industry, collective moral ground, but in how conversation surges and sidesteps, washes over rocks. I bid you help me chew these doughy rolls and helpings of gossip. I ask to shed judgment, fear of coyotes, this throat lump ache for banana ketchup and empanadas, the rainforest humid and folding. Allow me to breathe easy in Lewisburg's fish rot waft. Permit me one fit of cursing your name per black fly tornado. I beg for a hollow sea glass by summer's end, the gumption to meet the light in the eye of the seal I spied at dawn.
It's nice to hear it.
It's nice to hear someone else read your poems. I'm going to read one more. And in this poem, the speaker is Clarence, who's the lead male character of the story. And he is standing on Scattery Island.
Here he is.
Here he is, looking majestic. He's been counting seals because he's afraid that the government is inflating the colony numbers in order to justify a seal cull. What tales do seals pass down of creatures who stomp over ground, of ships and storms and a fearsome blaze? To whom do seals prey? To whom would a seal prey? What secrets burrow in pelts and flare in a deep sea spirit's eyes? Have you encountered one who dares to interpret these fog-mottled cries? Amid the mosses and over rock roam shadow wings and the wet green shock of wanderers gone astray. To whom do seals pray? To whom would a seal pray?
We're going to do another little convo now between two totally different characters. So this is, Pauline's going to be Lucy. She's the local mail carrier. And I'm going to be Flossie. Lucy, and Flossie is Lucy's mom. And Lucy lost a baby in a fire many years ago, not the fire, but just a house fire. And Flossie lost, when she was younger, lost her home in the Main-à-Dieu fire. And she's now much older, has a bit of dementia. In this scene, they're doing a lot of gossiping. Flossie sometimes sees birds flying about in the kitchen, and
there's also a ghost flying
oh
around.
yes, and the ghost of Moira, who's a ghost, is part of the story. She died just as the story begins, and she flies throughout, eavesdropping on everyone's conversations. So she's there too with the birds, and only Flossie really knows they're there.
It's settled, Mom. Russ took Clarence for the season.
I guess Janie's none too pleased.
She has her reasons. Lucas too, once school's out, but the blessing of the fleet, no doubt.
The three of them together sounds nice.
I don't know, Mom. Do you think it's wise? It's not even Lucas who wants to fish. You should have seen the look in Harriet's eyes.
So what does Katie say?
She won't have it. No way.
That's to do with Clarence.
It makes no sense. It's like Russ don't even care. All those years she worked with him. It's not fair. It's a wonder Russell would even let Claire on the boat.
Dear, would you grab my coat?
Ma, it's 100 degrees in here.
Is it? I don't know. The damp hits me harder every year.
Now, don't worry. You'll persevere. See any tree swallows yet? Are your warblers back?
Swallows for sure. So many I can't hardly keep track. And you know I love them warblers. They'll be in June.
Just keep your mind on the wee feather balls. Cheer you right up.
Look now, I nearly knocked over me cup.
It's okay, Mom. No harm done.
I can't get my mind off Moira. Gone without her son.
Of course she's gone. How do you mean?
To be divided from your child and sent on, I can't. Well, your little girl went without you. She were brave little soul.
Ma, don't. You can't. It's not as if she strolled off into the unknown. She was just a wee thing.
Lucy, my God, remember how Moira could sing?
Mom.
And how Clarence got blamed for that fire was hateful. Was it really so awful? The truth is, I'm grateful.
Grateful? How?
My eyes fell on this burnt bough. Everything was gone. I was stood there in the smoke. A little bird swooped through the air and landed as if nothing at all was wrong. And it hollered this magnificent song. It was what that fire wrought, and it shrugged its tiny shoulders and thought, that's as may be, but I have a job to do.
So did you, Mom. So did you. I know that better than anyone, but I expect less perfection since Holly's been gone.
Now we're going to jump to a little part of the book. So this is way back in the past now, post-fire. Until very recently, there was a publication in that kind of covered all the communities, like a little folded stapled booklet monthly called the Louisbourg Seagull, which I loved. And my father had a cousin who used to save all his copies for me, and he'd come over with a big stack of them when I got there in the summer. And there was a column in the Seagull called Bird's Eye View, and it was one of those columns where people would call in and write in to the author of like whatever they happened to see in their yard or whatever, and he would put it all in a column. And this is a set of poems inspired by the Louisbourg Seagull Bird's Eye View in our Main-à-Dieu foghorn, which is a fictional Louisbourg seagull. Louisbourg's the big community nearby. And so I'm going to read you two of the Bird's Eye View pieces from after the fire. Lucy Mountain of Wadden's Lane reports the cawing turned her head, a telltale silhouette atop a spruce in the ditch. The tree was one of a few still standing that far up the road, branches burnt to nubs, bark black as crow. The bird's teardrop shape on that distant branch Lucy took as a sign the fire was out this time for real. But mercy, the racket, and that charred, lonesome spruce, like a ghost, she said, a ribbon of cinders. She couldn't help hearing those caws as a soul calling out. Anguish is a word she used. Alarm, alarm, alarm. The barn swallows huddled in the eaves at Elias Gallant's have welcomed refugees. The flapping and rustling have increased tenfold. You wouldn't believe the commotion up there, Elias writes. The cheeping commences at 4 a.m. When Elias leaves for the wharf, they attack from the lintel, churi, bombs away. Elias believes the birds are trying to put out the fire. They make him think of water bombs, which he wishes had tumbled by the dozen out of helicopters that awful Sunday. No one can fathom the ministry's reasoning. Main-à-Dieu wasn't worth saving, we suppose. That burnt smell that singes your nose with every breath has the swallows on high alert. The very air is infused with disaster. Anything in motion is a threat. There's also some warblers, some plovers on the beach, an awesome eagle eating a crab on a safe, and cormorants hanging out on a couch on the beach. Anyway, we thought a lot about the birds and the animals, which we can talk about in our conversation later, because that came up this week with all the fire smoke in Ottawa too.
Yeah.
So the next one I'm going to read is from a set of what we call oral testimonies from the fire, and this is from a volunteer firefighter, Elias Gallant, and it's about when they were trying to save the church. I keep wondering, was it our fault, or we needed more pressure, or the pump just wore clean out, or what? It come to us secondhand like the hoses and lot. Find a source, turn the sucker on. The tide was low, the brook shallow all that season. All that spring, a dry season, brittle. The steeple cracked and smoked. We pumped and sprayed. Damn water wouldn't reach it. I rushed over the beach to shut her down. The pump ran my tail off amid the thundering. The smoke went right like a mug of rum to me head. The shoreline exploded, flames and tide colliding. I blinked. It vanished. I swears I heard that bell, clear as Sunday. A seal swam up, 2 boys hauling a couch, fellow with a big-ass TV on his head like a basket of fruit. I waved my arms and hollered, "Get your foolish arses away from here." It was raining ash, spears of grass ghosted before my eyes. And we're gonna finish our reading with one more. This poem is woven in through the comics. So there's stuff going on between some characters and the fire monsters lurking. You can see the fire monster there, and the poem sort of following the more volatile moments in this scene. So,
And this is the The fire is speaking for itself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was the most important thing I was supposed to say. We decided earlier. This is the fire speaking for itself. Yeah. As spring sparks, I crouch, lie low. Black spruce gather in my ash, moss's hint of afterglow. The torch's light was mine to bestow. Whose fury restores the berry patch? Absorbing spring, I crouch, sink low. Over grasslands, I might shriek and blow. Up mountain ranges, sear and slash. These mosses harbor an afterglow, reeking of peat and snowmelt woe. Combustion's a cinch, ignition, flash. Delighting in spring, I crouch, lie low. Transforming remnants to fuel slow work. I'm gathering kindling for my stash. Spring's ablaze, I crouch, lie low. Mosses smolder in afterglow.
All right. So I would like to note that, like the fire monster, if you talk about a graphic novelist, he shows up. So GFB Kumichuk is here, one of our preeminent graphic novelists.
You were discussed earlier.
I've
Yeah.
told a lot worse than that.
Yes, I know. So I wanted to open this up, talking about fire, because as you mentioned in some of your remarks, it's been a pretty fiery couple of weeks. I mean, your arrival back in Winnipeg, you were traveling elsewhere, was delayed
Yeah.
by fire.
Yeah.
And we've had pretty serious fires in Nova Scotia and Alberta recently. I found this quote from the National Weather Service, who said on Friday, "Smoke from Canadian wildfires continues to be transported south by winds into the US, resulting in moderate to unhealthy air quality across parts of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, and Midwest." And here in Manitoba, we often get smoke from BC and Alberta to the west and Ontario to the east. And it has become a really strange part of our summers, right? And seeing the midday sun through wildfire smoke is the biggest and strangest part of all of it, besides the air quality changes and all of that. Yeah, they say no amount of wildfire smoke is safe to breathe, right? And anyways, it's just been such a strange part of our climate changed world. And I know that this book in some ways had its genesis in your thinking about the power of fire. So how has how you've thought about fire changed since 2012 when you first started to work on this book, and since the 1976 fire that changed men? And I'm a French immersion kid, so I keep on wanting to say it the French way.
But the people who live there say Main-à-Dieu.
Main-à-Dieu. Yeah. So talk to me about fire and about how your thinking on fire has changed throughout this process or not changed.
I keep going back. So as Ariel said, I was stuck in Port Alberni this week with a group of people who were migrating west from Banfield, where we were all attending a birthday party. And we all got stuck in Port Alberni together, and we had to wait and wait and wait because there's only one road out. And the fire was making that road impassable. It's the Cameron Bluffs fire on Vancouver Island. And eventually, in order to be here, I had to go back to Tofino and get a seaplane to Vancouver in order to be able to leave. When I was there, just quickly, I was there in the same place in Port Alberni a few years ago for another celebration, a family thing. And the smoke was, like you said, that eerie sun in the sky. Sometimes the air would cool right off, and that was from wildfires in the interior of BC. But at that time, it was just something to talk about, that it was bad, but we weren't directly inconvenienced by it. This time, the road closed. There was a smoke plume heading south, and if the wind changed, we were all in big trouble. And gas stations ran out of gas. There was no milk in the store. People started, what you call it?
Hoarding?
Yeah, that. And then it was like, oh, well, you know, this is happening. This is what it's like. We're here. So on the second day when I realized I wasn't going anywhere, I called Anita. I'm standing under wildfire smoke in Port Alberni. She was in Ottawa where the air quality was horrible.
28 out of 10. That was the number on, was it Wednesday or Tuesday? It was Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just kept thinking about what was echoing in my head as you're afterward this book was, is this a blip or a harbinger? And I think the answer is obvious.
It's interesting. So the fire that instigated, the poems that instigated this book happened when I was 4 years old. It was, interestingly enough, exactly the same time of year in 1976 as the big fires in Nova Scotia this year in June, when normally in that part of the country, it would still be pretty cool and damp and rainy and everyone's complaining that it's not summer yet. And way back in 1976, it was an unusually dry, hot spring. And that sort of, that fire and stories about that fire kind of followed me through my life. And we were talking about it earlier today or yesterday about how I think I was so young when it happened. Part of the reason it stuck with me and became something that in my 40s I started writing about is that I became aware when it happened that it was possible. It was possible that a fire could come and burn your house down, because it burned down my grandparents' house and my uncle's house and the houses of several other extended relatives and neighbors, but it still seemed like an anomaly. And it's not an anomaly anymore. And the other thing is how the effects linger. So nobody was hurt, nobody died, but a lot of people lost their homes, a lot of people lost their things. And there were a lot of stories and experiences, some of them interesting, some of them comical, some of them bitter, that lingered. And when I think about it now and see what's happening, I think of that effect on that very small community on Cape Breton Island is now happening everywhere across the country every summer to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And it's kind of, well, it's sobering, it's overwhelming. This is where we are. Yeah. Mm.
You started this project in 2012. Were you explicitly trying, what drove you to work together on this project? What drove you to tell this story? And were there any points where you wanted to be more explicit about climate or other, do you know what I mean? Other, I'm just curious about how it started and how it evolved.
Do you want to talk about?
So Pauline and I used to work together on a little poetry magazine based in Ottawa called Arc Poetry Magazine. And we loved working together. And we used to do things that we hoped might go a little way to breaking poetry out of its silo or making people less afraid to encounter poetry. So one of the projects we had when we were there was we would take a poem every issue, a short poem, and marry it with an artist and commission we got funding to commission the artist to make a piece of art instigated by the poem, and we would put the poem and the artwork on a postcard as an insert in the magazine. And I don't know if it went anywhere toward breaking poetry out of its silo, but it was really fun, and the artists loved doing the work. And anyway, I think at a certain point, I left the magazine, Pauline left the magazine, we missed working together. We were standing in my kitchen in Toronto. I was living in Toronto at the time. I had a baby. I had started writing some poems related to the fire. And in the midst of a conversation about we should try doing something together, I said, well, and Pauline saying she wanted to push her art in a different direction.
Figurative.
Yeah,
Yes.
she'd been, well, you can speak to that, but Pauline had been doing non-figurative painting for many, many years, and she was feeling like she wanted to break out and do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I've been writing these poems. You want to look at them? You want to see if you want to do something with them? And that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't start out to be a story. It didn't start out to be a comic book. It didn't start out to be a fictional treatment of the fire. It was just, what will happen if I give Pauline these poems? and this is what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, over time, with
Yeah.
a lot of detours and
Yeah.
it got quite expansive at a certain, it got to a point where we had to rein it in and say, okay, it can't be a gallery installation and a puppet show. And like we had so much.
Oh yeah, and well, and there are songs in the book, so it did turn
Yes.
into music.
There's
a little
music
bit.
in the book, yeah.
And there were gonna, it was gonna be it was also gonna be, so the Main-à-Dieu Foghorn, for a while, we had a website for this fictional community publication, and we were writing fictional blog entries. And we realized if we keep working on the Main-à-Dieu Foghorn, we're never actually gonna finish our
Finish the
book.
book, yeah.
So we have to set that aside for now.
Yeah.
And Pauline's son helped us set up the website, and yeah.
It was really exciting because the idea was, is there any way we could create a wormhole from the fictional characters to the real world? And so the idea was have fictional characters write blog posts and have real people, comment on them and get little conversations going between the real people and the not real people. But like Anita said, we had to.
There's only so much you can do.
Yes.
But we spent a lot of time we spend time in Cape Breton every summer, my family, except there was a COVID year, we didn't go anyway, most of the time. And then Pauline came and spent a lot of time there with me, and we would sit in the kitchen, sometimes playing rummy and drinking whiskey, and sometimes working on our book at night. And I have a picture of the kitchen wall, and this is my grandparents' old house, the one that replaced the one that burned down in the fire, covered in sticky notes. And it was us like mapping out all these scenes that we might need in the book.
Sticky notes.
Yeah, sticky notes all over the kitchen wall. Yeah. I think we even took things off the wall to make room for, like, my grandfather's old boat license plate. I don't know if it's in the kitchen or if I had to take it down to make room for the map. But yeah.
Yes,
Exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have some like cross-genre questions. So Anita, how is a song different from a poem?
Oh God.
And Pauline,
Ariel.
and Pauline, how is a page of a graphic novel different than a painting?
You want to go first?
Well, I think this is going to sound crazy, but a song is sing-songy. You can sing it. Not every poem, I think, can easily be sung. So so some of these I wrote deliberately as songs, and I wrote them differently. They're more rhymey, and I know that song lyrics don't always rhyme, so that's not really a fair answer. I don't know. It's just feeling. It's feeling. I feel like this could be sung. I feel like it could be put to music. Although the very first one that Pauline's daughter Emma did put to music is called Russell's Hymn, and it did not start out as a song. It's just a poem, and it became a song. Emma turned it into a song.
Yeah.
So there may not always be a difference. Yeah.
And there's a great recording of that song in existence.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the only one that got treated with the respect that it deserves in the fullness of time, right?
Yeah, in the fullness of time, yeah. How do you
Stage.
answer your question?
Oh, yeah, so my question, the answer is totally, completely and utterly different. I can give you more detail though. I find the work of I love making comics because of the narrative aspect of it. I love how the words and the pictures can lean into each other and this story flows in. It's like two rivers running side by side, but I am it takes me a long time to finish a page. But I love it. It's very different. It's a lot less intuitive, I'd say.
I thought you were gonna say that. I can see it floating in your mind.
Yeah, whereas painting is a lovely process that I still engage in regularly, and it's a very intuitive process where I begin somewhere and end up somewhere else.
Have you found that working on this project, since, what is it, 2012, is that right? How is it, how has it shifted your respective arts practices? Besides the fact that it culminated in this book, what has it done to the rest of your practices?
I can start, actually.
Okay.
So one of the things it did for me, partly because I don't know if you noticed, but some of the dialogue we read, I also had a little fun with and made a bit rhymey because it was in the middle of this graphic novel full of poems. And doing that and writing some songs, and like one of the songs in the book is to the tune of the Mariner's Hymn, and I just rewrote the lyrics for one of our characters. It was a lot of fun, and it kind of helped me, I think, get over myself a bit when I'm sitting down to write a poem. Like the poem doesn't always have to mean the whole universe or whatever. You can just a lot of it was, even though it was within the framework of this project and we were trying to accomplish something, when I was sitting down to write this conversation in rhyming dialogue, it was play. And I mean, it's not that I never am playing when I'm writing poems, but it gave me more permission, I think. So it gave me like a wider way of engaging with the craft, if that makes any sense. More open, more silly sometimes. Yeah.
And I invested, I learned so much going through this process. I really didn't know how to do comics when I started. I had fooled around with it a little bit, but I learned, the learning curve was very steep, both technically and just drawing people again. So with that investment behind me, I feel like now I want to do more. There's a lot of resources that I've developed that I want to use. And so I've started another comic book project. And when I paint,
Super cool.
Oh, yeah. And when I paint people now a lot. And I didn't ever used to do that. I was quite rigorously anti-figure. So it's completely non-representational. But now I'm leaning into figurative work a lot more and really enjoying it.
So tell me about your choices about how to represent the dearly departed Moira, whose death basically is the inciting action for the book. It brings Clarence home, right? So she floats around and says things and does things, and Flossie can see her, but no one else can. And then the fire monster, right? So tell me about making those two characters flesh in the book.
Pauline did that, both of them.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's great. Why would you be sorry? It was Pauline's idea to bring Moira into the story in that way, and also to personify the fire monster or the fire. So it was just a fire before, and then Pauline personified it, and that's how we wound up with
But before
Fire monster.
personifying it, I wanted to make the fire a character in the book.
Yeah.
And it went through a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
That's where the puppets came in. But we ended up with this dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this just when, you know, as soon as we started talking about the idea of more being in the story as a ghost, it just made so much sense. It makes so much sense for her to be there. She has some unresolved stuff. She's still mad at her kind of wonky son, and mad that her house burned down. She never really got over it, and that's affected him his whole life. And so some things still need to be worked out after she's died. And
Plus, there was a thing about the narration, right? Because we had a seagull narrating the 1976 part of the story, but we didn't have a narrator for that, like an omniscient narrator to. So it was handy to have a ghost pop up.
yeah.
But they're as much eavesdroppers as they are and witnesses, right? Like they're on the edges of scenes watching, and on top, like the fire monsters on top of the house. You know, like there's all these moments. And I love that the cover image is the fire monster cradling Moira like she's a baby.
It's Flossie, actually.
That's Flossie. Oh, yes.
Flossie, yeah.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's such an interesting choice.
It's the Pieta, the Michelangelo's Pieta. That's where that's an appropriation of that.
So the first scene we read, no, it's not. It's the earlier scene with Harry and Lucas, which you guys couldn't hear yet. They are walking out to the back shore, and they are talking about the fire. And Harriet says, this is when Harriet has that idea. She has this idea that maybe it's just one fire that never ever actually completely goes out, and it's just waiting to come back wherever and whenever. And this was when I think you first drew.
Yeah.
This was when the fire monster first came to life, is out of that idea of Harriet's, basically, right? That's my memory of it. Yeah, yeah. And you loved that thing where, so she says, it's always been there waiting since the beginning of time, like a little piece of hell that got jogged loose. And then she says, I don't even believe in hell, but there it is, infiltrating my mind. And for some reason, Pauline
Giggles every time we hear it.
thinks that's hilarious.
There it is, infiltrating my mind.
All right, well, we should go to questions relatively soon, but I have a final question for you. How do a poet and a painter construct a narrative? Because I have to say, as a poet, plot's terrible. Plot is the bane of my existence. Who wants characters that go places and do things? Can't they just sit there and have thoughts and look at the light. Oh, the light. That's what the poets talk about, is the light. So tell me about plot and making plot for this.
I don't know how to answer that. Do you?
Well, I think it evolved, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, what we were working with, I'd say even for the first 4 or 5 years, was pretty wacky. I mean, esoteric just doesn't even cover it. But I think what happened was you went to Banff and you were talking to your mentors.
It was before
there.
that.
It was before that?
Yeah, I think we started, it started with, you know, this happens partly sometimes when I write poems, and I can't remember because I was writing poems partly based on stories people had told me, and so you end up with these characters, and then it's like, well, what are the characters going to do?
Yeah.
You know. And the other thing that happened was we talked to this fellow who somehow I'm probably related to, but we never figured out how, because his last name's also Lahey, who it turned out lived not far from us when we were in Toronto. And so part of the history of this actual fire is, one of the things people always used to whisper about when I was growing up is these 2 boys who supposedly started the fire. And I always wondered, like, really, did they really start the fire? B, what was that like for them? Everyone blaming them for this fire when they were growing up. And then it turned out one of them lived near me in Toronto, and we met, and he told me what it was like being blamed for the fire and what really happened. And he was only like 6 years old at the time. And we talked about it, and I think that is partly what, I might be remembering it wrong, but I think that's partly what made us set it 40 years later. And someone going home and like having gone away partly because they couldn't stay in that place where they'd grown up under that cloud, and what would happen if they went back. And that's partly where the plot came from.
And also from this sort of overarching concept of agency, which was always really interesting to me and was a real guiding thing, that, you know, the fire is an agent, but there's also global economic forces and other things happening that are agents that cause huge changes in these people's lives. And the fire was the punctuation. It was this moment, and everyone focuses on that as the reason that all the changes happen, that there's no school anymore, that our young men have to go away to work, and there's no store, et cetera, that the way the village has changed. But in actual fact, those changes might have been underway already. And so that was a reason to have those two time periods working against each other. But the story at a certain point, I think we just wanted it to make sense and have it and have an end, you know.
So we started to figure out, well, why would this person do this and why would this person do that? And it was actually really fun to work out plot, talking about together, you know, and like, no, they would do this because of this. Wait, you know, and that's partly how the characters solidified their personalities as well, was like in conversation.
Yeah. And then sometimes I'd say to Anita, really, I don't think he would say that.
Yeah.
He wouldn't say it like that.
Yeah.
So like that.
Like that.
That answers your question.
All right, John, are you going to appear from behind the Wizard of Oz curtain with the microphone? Are you going to do it? Oh, there you are.
I forgot he was back there.
Yeah. I could see him moving behind me. It's kind of freaky.
Goodness.
So if anyone does have any questions, please just put up your hand and I'll wander over to you with this microphone.
Ask one. Oh, I popped. There's so much popping.
Yeah.
Okay, so as it was pointed out earlier, I make comics, so this is coming from that standpoint. And it says here, this is your first graphic novel. And I came slightly late to the proceedings, so I don't know your relationship with comics before this. But most people's first graphic novels are usually not this ambitious, this well crafted, this well acted, you know, as far as the characters interplaying with one another. So yeah,
A review from the audience.
So if this is your beginning point as far as narrative goes, and it sounds like you also were using it as a way to explore your art practice and have a new challenge. What is the new challenge that your new work is accomplishing? I'm curious about that.
Well, I don't have Anita working with, I'm doing the writing on this one as well. So it's a story that we talked about working on together, but we just can't. Anita has a lot of other things going on right now. It's not a good time for her. So I just started working on it by myself, and doing the writing and everything is a different, it's the whole enchilada. And so that's a real challenge. I learned some technical foibles that I have in the process of doing this book that I'm trying to eradicate. I'm giving myself a different set of constraints in making the art. So trying to improve the craft and to really take what I learned at making this forward.
When people ask me, what should I do if I'm starting a new graphic novel, the first advice I give them is make sure it isn't hundreds of pages long.
Yeah. Sadly, I got that advice like after I did at
But-
one point read this list, like 10 things to not do in your first comic, and I did like all of them.
But I'm gonna have to reassess that advice because clearly it can work very well. So
Except
bravo.
it,
Yeah,
it
bravo.
took us
A long time.
10 years
Yeah. And during this time we were,
doing other things.
yeah, like having babies and working full time, and we, we moved like all over the place, everywhere, and yeah, it was crazy.
There
A
might
lot
be-
of this book was made in hotel rooms because I was traveling for work a lot, and so
There might be poems in the new book though, right?
yes. Oh, so Anita is going to collaborate with me on parts of the new book.
Yeah.
Yes, there's going to be some poetry drawn into the story, and I'm really excited about that.
There's a very, am I allowed to say there's a very unusual superhero?
You can say, because I actually am starting to post pages on
okay.
social media
Okay.
now, just one a week.
Okay.
So it's out there.
At the risk of monopolizing the microphone, I also want to ask, if it took that long to make the book, how did you manage a consistency of line throughout it? Usually people over that.
She
period of
doesn't
time-
think she did.
No,
Well,
I
I
don't
think-
think I did.
Yeah. Well, I think you did.
Oh, thanks. So it's Anita, and everybody's like, stop it, because I wanted to redraw the whole first couple of
There's
years.
sections that she made early on that she wishes she remade, but I think they look great.
That's the comic maker's curse though, so
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the questions. And
Sorry, I jumped into that one.
that's okay.
So I just, when you submitted the final product, the final manuscript, it was edited, was it? And who did it?
It was edited?
I just wondered, was it compressed at all? Was it the type, what you handed in, was it exactly what ended up being the book?
It's pretty close, actually.
Yeah, there was very little changed.
And who did that? Publisher?
The poetry.
And
editor,
us, yeah, the
Well-
poetry editor of Palimpsest is Jim Johnston. He's the one who took the book on. And
The only change he made was he took.
there was
the
very
dialogue.
little that he wanted us to do. He just was handed, which is very unusual,
Mhm.
I will say.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Was it, there were small changes, but was there any feeling about having things changed? Did you feel okay with it? Did you feel, did you like the changes? Is it difficult when it's your baby, so to speak, to have that baby?
so because we didn't really change much, I can answer that in general because everything else I write, goes through a lot with an editor, and I'm very comfortable with that process as long as I trust the editor. Exactly. Well, yeah, I was trained to not have a thin skin because, so yes, I started out in journalism as a magazine writer, and magazine, unlike a lot of editors in the literary universe, magazine editors don't care about your feelings. They care about turning your story into something publishable and readable and that fits in the space they have, and they'll just tear it apart and put it back together, and you just get used to that and you accept it. And so and yes, in fact, you realize you need it. You need that help. You need that outside eye. So I'm always grateful for an outside eye on my work. And in fact, I was surprised that we weren't asked to change
Yeah,
on
me
things
too.
on this book.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, like, collaborating with Anita is unlike any other collaboration relationship I've ever had, where anytime I said anything to you, you were totally positive about it. And I hope vice versa. Like, there was never a moment when I was like, when we were, working with each other's ideas and words and pictures and stuff. It was just always totally positive.
It was.
Mhm.
And I will also say we did a lot of editing of ourselves. I mean, the interesting thing is working with someone else, there's a lot of revising and editing that goes on in the middle of the process, because you have an idea, you work on it, and then you talk about it, and you're like, and you both agree, no, that's not working. We have to do it this way. And we have to redo that scene, or we have to, we're missing this, and you might not figure that out the first, like on your own as quickly, right? Yeah, it's like two brains coming at a problem with totally different ways of coming at the problem.
Thank you so much, both. Thank you all for your questions. We have now reached the top of the hour, so if you folks have any closing comments you might like to offer, I'll be back with signing procedure in a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to thank everyone who's here, and we want to thank McNally Robinson for having us here, and John for organizing us from behind the screen so wonderfully,
Yes.
and Ariel for hosting us.
Yes. Thank you.
With such great energy and humor.
And can I just give a special thank you to Joan Thomas, who's sitting here in the
Yes.
audience. She introduced, Anita introduced me to Joan when I came, and she's been just like my best friend in the whole prairies almost. But the first event, I moved here during COVID and lockdown, and it was a very lonely process and strange. And Joan, when things started to open up a bit, my very first Winnipeg going out in public with real people was to a book launch here with Joan. And we all had our masks on, and we had to show our, vaccination proof and everything to come in, but I was so excited. So it's really nice to be up here on the other side of the microphone. It's kind of weird, honestly. But thank you, Joan, for all your support.
Yes, thank you. Joan's
Oh, and
championed
also-
us throughout this whole
Yeah,
project.
and one of our really great readers who gave us some amazing feedback
Mhm.
in the final draft stages.
And since we're thanking people individually, Yvonne Blower came all the way
Oh,
from
yeah?
Victoria to join us. Here she is in her beautiful scarf. Yeah. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah.
The signing procedure will begin.
Thank you so much, Ariel, for that uncanny reproduction of my voice. I am so very grateful to all of you for joining us here tonight, to all of you joining online as well for your attention, and to all of you for your questions as well. I suppose I should grudgingly thank Ariel for her hosting this evening as well. So thank you so much, Ariel. So as mentioned, we will move along to the signing portion of the meeting. So we're going to be moving Anita and Pauline just to a table beside the cash desk. Please feel free to join us over there. You can get a copy of the book signed. We have copies at the table. We have copies at the central cash desk. You can get a copy signed first. Just please do remember to pay for the book at some point tonight. Pauline, it was so lovely to have you behind the microphone up here. So thank you so very much. And thank you, Anita, for coming and joining us as well. Please join me one more time in acknowledging Palimpsest Press, Pauline Conley, and of course,